Let's be real for a second. How often have you found yourself stuck in a conversation, struggling to get your point across? Or worse, watching someone else twist your words into something they were never meant to be? You know the type of conversations I'm talking about, the ones where logic flies out the window and emotions take over, leaving you feeling frustrated, unheard, or misunderstood. What if I told you there's a way to cut through all that noise and communicate in a way that actually gets results? And no, it's not about being manipulative or playing games. It's about something far more powerful: pragmatism. In this video, we're going to dive deep into the art of communication, but with a twist that most people overlook. I'll show you how to speak in a way that doesn't just sound good. It works. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll have a set of tools that will change the way you approach every conversation from now on. Don't just talk, talk with purpose, and watch how the world starts to listen. Keep watching, and let's break down the real secrets of communication. Number 1. The silence advantage. Imagine this. You're in a conversation, and everyone is talking, sharing their ideas, their opinions, basically dominating the airwaves. You're just listening, nodding along, until suddenly you decide to do something completely unexpected. You don't say a word, you just stay silent. No interruptions, no added commentary. Now, before you get all skeptical on me and think that sounds passive-aggressive, trust me, it's not. It's a strategy, one that has the power to shift the entire dynamic of any conversation. It's called the silence advantage, and yes, I'm serious. You know the type. You've been there, right? You're in a meeting, a family dinner, or even a casual chat with friends, and someone's talking at full speed, dissecting, explaining, maybe even talking over you. You might feel like you need to jump in, to defend your position, to make sure your point is heard. But here's the thing. What if not speaking is the most powerful thing you could do? What if, instead of scrambling for the right words, you let silence do all the work for you? Think about it. When you're silent in a conversation, people tend to fill the space. And guess what happens? They start to reveal more than they intended. They may soften their stance, clarify their arguments, or, dare I say it, start second-guessing themselves. When there's no rush to reply, no pressure to keep talking, you allow the conversation to unfold in a way that's completely out of your control. And here's the kicker. That's exactly where the magic happens. I get it. You might be thinking, but won't they think I'm uninterested or rude? Well, no. Here's the beauty of silence. It's an invitation. It creates a subtle but powerful tension that actually compels people to say more, to share more, to engage more. And this isn't about being passive. It's about taking control of the rhythm of the conversation. It's a tactical pause that often leads to deeper, more meaningful dialogue. Let me give you a real example. A few months ago, I was in a heated discussion with a colleague about a project we were working on. He was going on and on, throwing out data points, trying to convince me of his strategy. Normally, I'd jump in, counter his arguments, and try to sway the conversation back to my perspective. But this time, I decided to do something different. I stayed quiet. I didn't nod, didn't interrupt, just let him keep talking. And you know what happened? After a few minutes, he started questioning his own points, asking me, "What do you think about this part?" That was my opening. By saying nothing, I created a space for him to rethink his stance. The conversation shifted dramatically, and I was able to guide it in the direction I wanted, all because I stayed silent. Now, here's the real power of this. The silence advantage isn't just about getting people to talk more. It's about reclaiming control of the conversation without raising your voice. It's about your peace, your space. You don't have to over-explain. You don't have to scramble for answers. You simply allow the other person to fill the void. And in doing so, you gain so much more than you expect. So the next time you find yourself in a discussion, whether it's at work or with friends or even with family, remember this. Silence doesn't mean you have nothing to say. It means you have everything under control. And if you master the art of silence, you'll realize that conversations become less about fighting for your voice and more about creating room for what truly matters. The silence advantage is about strength in restraint. It's about respecting yourself enough to let others fill the space. You don't have to dominate every conversation. In fact, when you let the silence speak for you, you may just find that you're more powerful than ever before. Number 2, truth with a twist. Here's a little secret. Sometimes the best way to tell the truth is by twisting it just a little. Wait, what? You might be thinking, isn't truth supposed to be black and white? No room for bending here. But trust me, there's power in a well-timed twist. It's not about lying, it's about presenting the truth in a way that grabs attention, opens minds, and keeps you in control of the conversation. Now, before you get all judgy on me, hear me out. Truth with a twist doesn't mean you're being deceptive or sneaky. It's about emphasizing certain details, shifting perspectives, and framing the truth in a way that makes it pop. Think of it as painting a picture. You're still using the same colors, but you're choosing to highlight different elements to create something more vivid. This strategy isn't about manipulating people, it's about engaging them. Yes, trust me on this, it works. We've all been there, right? You're in a discussion, and no matter what you say, the other person just doesn't seem to be getting it. They're so entrenched in their perspective that it feels like you're speaking a different language. Maybe it's a friend who's set in their ways, a coworker who won't listen to reason, or even a family member who just won't acknowledge your point. It's frustrating. You want to scream, "This is the truth. Why can't you see it?" But instead you stand there, your words lost in the noise. Sound familiar? Here's the twist. Instead of hammering them with the truth the way you always do, why not try twisting it? Don't just present the facts, reframe them. Turn the truth on its head in a way that forces the other person to see things from a completely new angle. You're not lying, you're just making it interesting enough for them to actually listen. Take a moment and think about this. Have you ever had to explain something to someone who just wasn't getting it? Maybe you've been that person too, staring at a friend's long-winded explanation, thinking, "I'm sure this makes sense, but my brain is just not absorbing it." Well, I had a similar experience with a colleague not too long ago. We were working on a project, and every time I explained a new idea, he shot it down. Too out there, too risky. So I decided to shift my approach. I started telling him the same idea, but framed it as a strategy that had already been proven in another industry, something they were doing successfully. Suddenly, the same concept wasn't just a risky move, it was innovative, visionary even. His entire tone shifted. Why? Because by adding that twist, I gave him a way to process the truth in a more compelling way. Now I know what you're thinking, but isn't that just bending the truth? Isn't that a little manipulative? Well, not really. It's all about timing and context. You're still telling the truth, but you're presenting it in a way that resonates better with your listener. You're giving them something they can hook onto, and ultimately, they'll be more likely to buy into it. After all, don't we all respond better to stories and angles that spark curiosity or surprise? Here's where it gets even more empowering. Truth with a twist isn't just about persuading others, it's also about reclaiming your space in conversations. It's about taking control of the narrative, shifting it so that your point doesn't just get heard, it sticks. It allows you to communicate in a way that's more strategic, more impactful. No more shouting into the void or over-explaining yourself just to be understood. You've got the power to frame the truth in a way that demands attention and respect. So the next time you're facing a challenge, whether at work, with friends, or in a tough conversation, remember, you don't have to hit people over the head with the same tired, straightforward argument. You don't have to settle for them not hearing you. Instead, give the truth a twist. Paint your words in a way that sparks curiosity, creates space for new understanding, and makes your voice impossible to ignore. This is your truth, your perspective, and your story to tell. Own it, twist it, and watch the conversation shift in your favor. Number 3, the disruption play. Here's a bold thought. What if the best way to move forward in life isn't by staying in your lane, but by throwing a little chaos into the mix? Now, before you start imagining a wild, reckless kind of chaos, let me clarify. I'm talking about strategic disruption. Sounds risky? Maybe. But trust me, it's one of the most powerful tools in your arsenal when it comes to communication and getting things done. You might be thinking, wait, aren't we supposed to avoid conflict? Isn't disrupting things a bad thing? Well, that's exactly where most people go wrong. The thing is, we often assume that disruption means something negative, like throwing a wrench in the works or creating unnecessary conflict. But that's not the case. Disruption, when done the right way, creates space for growth, change, and innovation. It shifts people's thinking, jolts them out of their comfort zones, and makes them rethink their approach. We've all been there, haven't we? That moment when you're in a meeting or talking to someone and you know they're stuck in their ways. They're so entrenched in their thinking that no matter how many logical points you make, they just can't see beyond their own narrow perspective. It's frustrating. You start to wonder, how do I get them to wake up to the possibilities? How do I get through to them? And if you're like most of us, you might try harder to be even more logical, to present more facts, to make your point clearer. But guess what? It often doesn't work. They're too comfortable with their own thinking to entertain new ideas. So, here's the secret. Instead of trying to play nice and stay within the boundaries of the conversation, try shaking things up a little. I call it the disruption play. It's not about being rude or aggressive. It's about intentionally challenging the status quo. The next time you're faced with a stubborn mindset, instead of presenting your points as usual, throw in something unexpected, something that might momentarily derail the conversation. It could be a bold question, an unusual comparison, or even a controversial statement. Something that makes people stop in their tracks and reconsider what they thought they knew. Here's an example. A few years ago, I was working with a team on a project. We were all discussing a pretty conventional approach to solving a problem, but I could tell the team was stuck in a loop. Everyone was just agreeing with the same old ideas. They were comfortable, but the project was stalling. So I did something a little unexpected. Instead of adding more to the discussion or suggesting a tiny tweak, I asked, what would happen if we completely ignored the rules we've been following? What if we just threw them out and started from scratch? The room went quiet. At first, they thought I was joking, but as we continued, it sparked something. People started thinking outside the box, coming up with wild ideas that led us to a much more innovative and effective solution. I wasn't being disruptive just for the sake of it. I was shaking the tree to see what might fall out, and what fell out were fresh, game-changing ideas. Now, I know what you're thinking. But what if they think I'm crazy or out of line? Here's the thing. Strategic disruption isn't about being reckless. It's about using just the right amount of challenge to get people to look at things differently. It's about creating space for new ideas without trying to force them in. And most importantly, it's about having the confidence to challenge comfort zones, because that's where growth happens. When you disrupt, you reclaim your space. You reclaim your ability to think creatively and speak up when it matters. You don't have to back down to groupthink or follow the herd. You can step up, make your voice heard, and force people to rethink their assumptions. And the best part? You don't have to be loud or aggressive to do it. You just have to be willing to challenge the obvious, question the routine, and offer up something new. So, the next time you find yourself in a conversation or situation that feels stagnant, don't be afraid to shake things up a little. Ask the question no one's asking. Present an idea that feels a bit uncomfortable. Disrupt the flow, just enough to spark new thinking. It's not chaos for the sake of chaos. It's purposeful disruption to create change. Here's the thing. You're not just changing the conversation. You're changing how people think, how they approach problems, and how they see you. The disruption play is about taking control, pushing boundaries, and creating space for new possibilities. When you disrupt with purpose, you take the lead, not just in the conversation, but in the future of whatever you're working on. So what are you waiting for? Step out of the ordinary, challenge the norm, and watch how everything starts to shift. It's your world to disrupt. Number 4, perception engineering. Here's a little secret. Perception is everything. It's not what you say, it's how others perceive it. Sounds like mind games, right? But trust me on this. Perception is the lens through which people view the world. And if you can engineer that lens, you can change how they see you, your ideas, and even your potential. Now, I know this might sound like a bit of a power play, but hear me out. Perception isn't just for politicians or influencers. It's a tool you can use in everyday life to level up your interactions and make a lasting impact. Now you might be thinking, wait, so I'm supposed to manipulate how people see me? Isn't that kind of fake? I get it. The idea of engineering someone's perception might feel a bit uncomfortable, like you're somehow being deceptive. But let's clear that up. It's not about lying or being disingenuous. It's about understanding the cues that shape how people form opinions and then deliberately highlighting the things that work to your advantage. It's about framing your message so that it resonates in a way that makes people sit up and pay attention. And here's the kicker. It works whether you're trying to land a job, get support for an idea, or simply stand your ground in a conversation. Think about it. You know the type, someone who can walk into a room and just own it. They might not even say much, but there's something about them. Maybe it's the way they carry themselves or how they seem to effortlessly connect with others. The truth is, they're not just lucky. They're mastering the art of perception. We've all been in situations where we've watched someone command attention and we didn't even know how they did it. Well, the answer is often perception engineering, deliberately shaping how you're seen before you even open your mouth. Here's where it gets interesting. The key to perception engineering is understanding what people already believe and feel, and then tailoring your actions and words in a way that fits that narrative, without trying to be someone you're not. It's like giving a slight nudge to the story people are already telling themselves about you. For example, if you're a quiet, introverted person, but you're about to make an important point in a meeting, you don't have to suddenly act like the loudest voice in the room. Instead, you can engineer your perception by showing up with a calm confidence, speaking deliberately, and ensuring that when you do speak, your words carry weight. You've subtly set the stage for others to see you as thoughtful and powerful without forcing a personality change. Let me tell you about a time I put this into practice. A few years ago, I was in a situation where I needed to convince a team to follow my idea for a project. The problem? I wasn't the loudest voice in the room, but I knew I had a solid idea, and I wasn't going to let it get buried. So instead of launching into my usual spiel, I took a different approach. I walked in early, made a few connections with people on the side, and started planting the idea in casual conversations. By the time the meeting started, the idea had already taken root, and when I spoke up, It wasn't a me versus them situation. It was our idea. I didn't just present a proposal. I engineered the perception that we were all on the same page and that this was the next logical step. It worked. The team rallied behind me, and we ended up executing the project successfully. Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds like manipulation. But here's the thing. When done ethically, perception engineering isn't about tricking people. It's about aligning your strengths with what others value. It's about understanding human behavior and leveraging that knowledge to communicate more effectively. It's a way to stand out without having to shout louder than everyone else. And it's about giving people a chance to see the best version of you, the version you want them to see. Perception engineering isn't just about getting what you want. It's about reclaiming your space in a world that's full of noise and distraction. It's about making sure that when you speak, people listen, and when you act, people take note. It's about feeling empowered to shape your narrative and not let others define it for you. It's about being seen in the way you want to be seen, without having to apologize for it. So, what's the takeaway here? Don't wait for others to define who you are. Take control of your narrative. Be strategic in how you present yourself, and understand that perception is a powerful tool in communication. It's not about pretending to be someone you're not. It's about showing up as the person you want to be seen as. And trust me, once you master this, people won't just listen to you, they'll start believing in you. Your space, your peace, and your dignity are yours to engineer. Don't let anyone else dictate how you're perceived. Shape your story, own your narrative, and watch how everything shifts in your favor. Number 5, the empathy paradox. Here's a thought for you. Empathy is a double-edged sword. Wait, what? Isn't empathy supposed to be the ultimate tool for connection, understanding, and compassion? Yes, absolutely, but hear me out. It's also something that can be easily overused, misunderstood, or even manipulated. You might think that the more empathy you give, the more you'll be respected, trusted, or appreciated. But sometimes too much empathy can actually backfire. Now, before you start thinking I'm suggesting you throw compassion out the window, let me explain why this is an important paradox to understand. Now, you might be thinking, wait, isn't empathy supposed to be the key to meaningful relationships? Well, yes and no. We've all been in situations where we've tried so hard to empathize with someone, bending over backwards to understand their feelings and validate their experience. You know the type, the friend who is constantly overwhelmed by their problems, and you just want to be there for them, listening and offering support. You've probably even felt guilty for not doing enough, or for not feeling their pain deeply enough. But here's the thing. After a while, this one-sided emotional investment starts to drain you. And let's face it, we've all been there, feeling like the emotional caretaker, but never getting the same understanding in return. So, here's where the paradox comes in. Empathy, when used in moderation and with clear boundaries, is a beautiful thing. But too much empathy can create an unhealthy dynamic. It can lead to what I call empathy exhaustion, when you give so much emotional energy to others that you forget to take care of yourself. Worse, it can sometimes make others dependent on your emotional labor, expecting you to carry their burdens indefinitely. You end up being the one who is constantly stretched thin, emotionally drained, and unable to nurture your own needs. It's hard to admit, but there's a point where empathy shifts from something that strengthens relationships to something that weakens you. And I know it sounds harsh, but sometimes less is more. The key to solving this paradox lies in understanding that empathy doesn't mean you always have to be the one who carries the emotional weight. It's about creating a balance, showing compassion without sacrificing your own emotional well-being. Let me share an example from my own life. A while back, I had a close friend who was going through a tough time. I truly wanted to be there for them, to listen to their struggles, to help them work through it. And at first, everything seemed fine. But over time, I noticed that I was becoming more and more drained. Every time we spoke, it felt like the same conversation. "This is hard. I don't know what to do. Can you help me figure this out?" Don't get me wrong, I cared deeply, but after a while, it started to feel like I was doing the emotional heavy lifting for both of us. I wasn't setting boundaries, and I wasn't letting myself step back when I needed to recharge. It wasn't until I hit a breaking point that I realized the problem wasn't that I wasn't being empathetic. It was that I was overextending myself without asking for the same level of care in return. That moment forced me to face the truth. Empathy is a two-way street, and it's okay to step back and set boundaries. It doesn't mean I stopped caring or being there for my friend, it just meant I needed to find a healthier balance. So, I started being more mindful of my own emotional needs and made sure that I wasn't just the listener, but also the one who could ask for support when needed. The result? I was able to be more present for my friend without burning out, and we both grew stronger as a result. This is about reclaiming your space, your peace, and your emotional well-being. It's about understanding that while empathy is powerful, you don't have to give it away at the expense of your own health. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's a necessary act of self-care that allows you to show up for others when it truly counts. The takeaway here is simple. Empathy is a gift, but don't let it become your burden. Be kind, be compassionate, but remember that you matter too. If you give too much without replenishing, you risk losing yourself in the process. Empower yourself by practicing self-awareness, checking in with your emotional reserves, and being intentional about when and how you offer your empathy. Your energy is precious, and the best way to show up for others is by first showing up for yourself. So, embrace the empathy paradox, not as a burden, but as a balanced tool. When you find that balance, you'll be able to show up for the people who matter most without losing yourself along the way. Your space, your peace, and your dignity are worth protecting, and with the right boundaries, you can be a force of compassion without feeling depleted. Number 6. Challenge the status quo. Here's a truth most people don't want to admit. The status quo is often just an excuse for playing it safe. You know that feeling when everyone around you seems comfortable with how things are, but deep down, you know something isn't quite right. It's as if there's a rule book that everyone is following, but no one ever stopped to ask if that rule book actually works. Now, I know what you might be thinking, but challenging the status quo is risky. What if it backfires? Yes, trust me on this. It might. But here's the catch. Staying within the lines is just as risky, and probably more limiting in the long run. We've all been there. You've been in a meeting, a conversation, or a situation where everyone is nodding along to something that just doesn't sit right with you. Maybe it's the way things are being done at work, or how a family tradition keeps repeating itself without ever being questioned. And then there's you, quietly thinking, shouldn't we be doing this differently? Is anyone else noticing this doesn't make sense? You know the type, someone who feels the pressure to fit in, to just go along with the crowd, even when they have that nagging feeling something could be better. The truth is, challenging the status quo isn't easy, and it's definitely uncomfortable at times. But here's the thing, it's the only way to make meaningful change. The strategy I'm talking about isn't about being rebellious just for the sake of it. It's about being intentional. It's about recognizing when what's normal isn't really serving anyone and having the courage to question it. It's about shifting your perspective and daring to ask the uncomfortable questions. Why does it have to be this way? Who benefits from this? And what would happen if we tried something else? These aren't just questions, they're invitations to create the space for change. Challenging the status quo doesn't mean throwing everything out the window. It means having the confidence to try a new path, to do things in a way that makes more sense, even if no one else is doing it that way. I'll give you an example from my own life. A few years ago, I was in a job where the same processes had been followed for years. I had joined a team that had grown complacent. Everyone was comfortable and things were just fine. But there was a problem. The fine way of doing things was holding us back. There was this one particular meeting every week, and it had become a routine. People sat around, talked about their tasks, and left the room without any real action being taken. One day I decided to speak up. I said, "What if we shifted this meeting to something more interactive? Maybe we could brainstorm new ideas, or even challenge each other to step outside our comfort zones." At first, I could feel the hesitation in the room. People weren't sure. Some of them were even a little defensive. But I pushed through. I framed it as an experiment. "Let's just try it for a week," I said. And you know what? That meeting became one of the most productive ones. We brainstormed solutions we'd never considered before. People felt more engaged, and we actually got things done. That simple shift in perspective didn't just change the meeting, it sparked a culture change. We weren't just going through the motions anymore. This is about reclaiming your space, your peace, and your dignity. When you challenge the status quo, you're not just challenging a system, you're claiming your power to influence and change the way things are. Sure, it feels risky at first. It feels like stepping out of line when everyone else is content with the familiar. But the beauty of questioning things is that it gives you the freedom to create something better, something more aligned with your values and the needs of those around you. It's an act of self-respect and courage. So, here's the takeaway. Don't settle for just fine. Don't accept that things have to be a certain way just because they always have been. Challenge the status quo, not because you want to break things for the sake of it, but because you believe there's a better way. Your space, your peace, and your dignity are worth questioning everything for. And the more you practice this mindset, the more empowered you become to lead the charge for meaningful change. When you challenge the status quo, you're not just disrupting the system, you're creating room for something greater. Number 7, the power of discomfort. Here's a truth most people don't like to admit. Discomfort is where real growth happens. I know. Sounds counterintuitive, right? We live in a world that tells us to avoid discomfort at all costs. If something makes us uncomfortable, we're taught to step away from it. But what if I told you that the key to unlocking your potential lies in leaning right into that discomfort? Now, you might be thinking, why would I ever want to intentionally feel uncomfortable? Trust me, it's not as crazy as it sounds. In fact, it's the game changer you didn't know you needed. We've all been there. You've faced situations that pushed you outside your comfort zone. Maybe it was a difficult conversation you had to have, a new job that made you feel out of your depth, or even trying something you had no idea how to do. You know the type, the moments when you hesitate, when your palms get sweaty, and you wonder if you're making a huge mistake. But here's the kicker. It's in those exact moments that you're growing. It's easy to think that success comes from comfort, from having everything figured out. But the reality is, if you never step into the unknown, you're just staying stagnant. The strategy I'm talking about is simple yet powerful. Embrace discomfort. Whether it's physical, emotional, or mental discomfort, every ounce of it holds the potential to teach you something. The reason why discomfort leads to growth is rooted in human psychology. We grow when we're stretched beyond our current abilities, when we face challenges that force us to think differently, take risks, and adapt. It's like working out at the gym. If you always lift the same weight, your muscles never get stronger. But when you push your limits, that's when your strength increases. It's the same with your mind, your skills, and your emotional resilience. I'll give you an example from my own life. A few years ago, I had to step into a leadership role that terrified me. I had zero experience managing a team, and to make matters worse, the team I inherited was underperforming. I had no idea how to turn things around, and every decision felt like a gamble. But I knew one thing: if I played it safe, we'd just stay stuck. So I embraced the discomfort. I started having tough conversations with the team, stepping up in ways that felt unnatural to me. Every time I did, I felt my heart racing, my mind doubting, but I pushed through. And slowly, the results started to show. We turned things around, not because I was perfect, but because I was willing to step into the discomfort and learn from it. Those uncomfortable moments weren't just obstacles, they were the training grounds for growth. This is about reclaiming your space, your peace, and your dignity. If you keep avoiding discomfort, you're avoiding the very thing that will help you evolve. It's normal to feel nervous or uneasy when you step into new territory, but that doesn't mean you should run from it. In fact, those moments are the most important. They're the ones that challenge you to rethink what's possible, to push past your limits, and to see that you're capable of more than you ever imagined. So, here's the takeaway. Don't shy away from discomfort. Seek it out. Embrace it. Because in that space of unease, that's where the magic happens. Your growth is on the other side of that discomfort. Your space, your peace, and your dignity aren't just found in safety. They're found in stepping into the challenges that make you stronger. It's in the uncomfortable that you truly discover what you're made of. Number 8. Data overload. Here's a little truth that might hit home for many of us. We're drowning in data. It's everywhere. On our phones, in our emails, on social media, in meetings and at work. Everywhere we turn, there's information piling up. And honestly, it's starting to feel like it's all just too much. You're probably nodding right now, thinking, yes, I've had enough. Now, you might be wondering, but how do I even start managing all this? Don't worry, I've got you covered. It's not as impossible as it sounds, and it all comes down to one simple yet powerful idea. Less is more. We've all been there. You sit down to work, and suddenly you're bombarded with notifications, emails, and an endless stream of articles and reports to sift through. You know the type, the ones that promise to change your life or make your work 10 times more efficient. But in the end, they just pile onto the already overwhelming stack of things you need to get done. You might find yourself scrolling endlessly, unsure of where to start or what's actually important. Your brain feels fried, and yet you can't stop. Sound familiar? Here's the secret. The solution isn't to keep absorbing more data. In fact, it's about actively choosing what to ignore. This might sound like an impossible task in our information-overloaded world, but think about it for a moment. The more data you take in, the less mental space you have for the things that truly matter, whether that's creativity, problem-solving, or just the ability to think clearly. The trick is to stop trying to absorb everything and start getting intentional about what you need to know. When you simplify your intake and focus on what's truly relevant, you can cut through the noise and make better decisions with ease. I'll give you a quick example from my own life. A while ago, I found myself constantly checking emails, scrolling through social media, and catching up on every trending topic, all while trying to stay productive. It felt like I was working all day, but somehow I was getting nowhere. That's when I realized I was giving my attention to everything but what actually moved me forward. So I made a change. I implemented a 30-minute information detox at the start of every day, where I didn't check emails, social media, or any unnecessary data. Instead, I focused on one single task that aligned with my goals. It wasn't easy at first. I'd feel the urge to check my notifications constantly, but the difference was night and day. Suddenly, I had more mental space and clarity to tackle what really mattered, and my productivity skyrocketed. The key? Choosing what to focus on and what to let go. This is about reclaiming your time, your peace, and your mental clarity. If you don't make the conscious decision to prioritize the information that truly serves you, you'll continue to drown in unnecessary noise. And hey, I get it. It's tough. We've all been taught that more is better, but in reality, less allows you to focus on what truly moves the needle. So, next time you're feeling overwhelmed by all the data, take a step back and ask yourself, is this really worth my energy? Does this move me closer to my goal? By creating space for the right information, you're giving yourself the gift of clarity, productivity, and peace of mind. Here's the takeaway. Stop trying to absorb everything. Choose quality over quantity. In the world of data overload, the strength lies in the ability to focus on what truly matters. Your space, your peace, and your dignity come from clearing out the mental clutter. And by doing that, you'll find that your productivity and well-being will follow. Trust me, less is truly more. Number 9. The reverse psychology ruse. Here's a little secret I bet you didn't see coming. Sometimes the best way to get someone to do something is to tell them the opposite. I know it sounds a bit manipulative, but trust me, it's more like a subtle art than any kind of trickery. This is the power of reverse psychology. Now, before you roll your eyes or assume this is just some old-school mind game, hear me out. It's not about playing dirty. It's about shifting perspective and creating the right conditions for the person to want to take action themselves. And yes, this works on more people and situations than you might think. We've all been there, having that conversation with a friend or colleague who's just not getting the point. Maybe they're stubborn, or they're just not listening. Or perhaps you've had that moment when you really need someone to do something, but you can't seem to get them to agree. You know the type, the ones who insist on doing things their way, even when it's clearly not working. It's frustrating, right? You don't want to be the nag or the one pushing too hard, but you also need things to move forward. So, what do? You turn the tables. Here's where reverse psychology comes into play. Instead of pushing harder, you pull back. You suggest the exact opposite of what you actually want and watch the magic happen. Now, this isn't about tricking people into doing things they don't want to do. It's about using the natural human instinct to rebel against being told what to do. When you say, "I don't think you should go for that promotion," or "you might want to just skip working out today," you trigger that rebellious part of them that wants to prove you wrong. The result? They end up doing the very thing you wanted in the first place. Let me share an example. A few years ago, I was working with a team on a project, and one person in particular was always hesitant to take charge, even though they were the most capable. Every time we needed someone to step up, they would shy away. So, instead of pushing them or continuously encouraging them, which, let's be honest, was getting old, I switched gears. I said, "You know what? I don't think this role is for you. Maybe you're just not cut out for it." And boom, like flipping a switch, they suddenly had this fire to prove me wrong. They jumped into the role with confidence, and the results were amazing. They ended up not only thriving but also surprising themselves. It wasn't that I didn't believe in them. It was about triggering their natural drive to rise above what I had suggested. It worked because it wasn't about manipulation. It was about creating the space for them to take action on their own terms. This is about reclaiming your space, your influence, and your ability to get things done without force. Reverse psychology isn't about playing games or being sneaky. It's about understanding human behavior and using it to create positive outcomes. It's a strategy that takes a little finesse, but when done right, it can empower both you and the other person to achieve what's necessary all while maintaining respect and dignity. It's also about shifting your mindset. Rather than constantly trying to convince, you let the other person arrive at their own conclusion. So here's the takeaway. Next time you're facing resistance, don't push harder. Step back, say the opposite of what you want, with a touch of humor and care, and watch how people rise to the occasion. You've got the power to shift the dynamic without ever having to demand anything. Your space, your peace, and your dignity remain intact, and you might just get more than you expected in return. Reverse psychology isn't about trickery, it's about making room for people to surprise themselves. Number 10. The information Trojan horse. Here's a little secret you probably didn't expect. Sometimes, the best way to deliver a tough message or ask for something is to sneak it in under the radar. Yes, I'm talking about the information Trojan horse, an approach that's equal parts clever and subtle. Think of it like this. You've got something important to say, but the person you need to tell might not be open to it right away. So, instead of going in with all guns blazing, you wrap your message inside something seemingly harmless, letting it slip into their mind without them even realizing it. Now, you might be thinking, that sounds a bit manipulative, doesn't it? But trust me, it's not about being sneaky or underhanded. It's about making your message easier to hear and more likely to be received well. We've all had those moments, right? You need to get someone on board with your idea, but they're just not having it. Maybe they're set in their ways, or they've got their defenses up, ready to shoot down anything you suggest. You know the type. The ones who love to argue before they even listen. Maybe it's a colleague, a friend, or even a family member who's just not seeing things your way. So what do? Do you keep pushing? Do you argue your point until you're blue in the face? I get it, it's frustrating. But what if there was another way? Enter the information Trojan horse. Instead of forcing your point into their face, you introduce it sneakily, wrapped up in something they already like or are interested in. It could be a casual conversation about something they enjoy, or a story that's relevant to their current situation. Slowly, you plant the seed, and suddenly, boom, the idea takes root in their mind, and they don't even realize you were the one who planted it. The beauty of this strategy is that it doesn't feel like persuasion at all. It feels like they arrived at the idea on their own, and when people believe they came to the conclusion by themselves, they're far more likely to take action. I'll give you a personal example. A while ago, I was trying to convince a friend to join me in a fitness challenge. She was really resistant at first. "I don't have time for that," she said. "I'm too busy." The usual arguments, right? So instead of directly asking her again, I started casually talking about the benefits I was noticing, how much more energy I had, how my mood was improving, and even how I was sleeping better. It wasn't a hard sell. I didn't even mention the challenge at first. But over time, she started bringing it up on her own, asking more questions, and before I knew it, she was signing up for the challenge on her own terms. The funny part? She didn't realize she'd been subtly nudged into the decision, and honestly, neither did I. It wasn't manipulation. It was just a smooth and natural way to get the message across without triggering any resistance. This approach works because it taps into something deeply human. We hate being told what to do. The moment we feel like we're being persuaded, we often shut down. But when the message comes in through an indirect path, when we feel like we're in control of the decision, we're far more likely to be receptive. It's about reclaiming the space to present your ideas without pushing them on anyone. And it's also about understanding the psychology behind how people process information. This is not about being deceptive. It's about offering people the freedom to come to conclusions on their own, while still influencing them in the right direction. Here's the thing. When you start using the information Trojan horse, you're not just getting your message across. You're also freeing yourself from the stress of constantly over-explaining or justifying your ideas. It's about creating an environment where ideas can be received without friction, where you don't have to fight for validation, but instead allow people to arrive at the same conclusion in their own way. This strategy isn't about tricking anyone. It's about giving them the chance to embrace an idea that benefits them without feeling cornered. So, next time you're faced with a situation where you need someone to come around to your point of view, don't push, don't argue, and don't force it. Find your information Trojan horse. Let your message slide in naturally, like a little gift wrapped in a bigger, more comfortable package. The best ideas are often the ones we think we come up with on our own. And remember, your space, your peace, and your dignity remain intact, while you get to watch people embrace what you've always known to be the right choice. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope this video gave you some valuable insights and practical tips to help you communicate with more purpose and clarity. If you found this content helpful, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and reach more people who could benefit from this kind of practical knowledge. And if you want to see more videos on topics just like this, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications so you never miss out. If you know someone who struggles with communication or just wants to level up their skills, share this video with them. Let's spread the knowledge. Also, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and share your thoughts or personal experiences on how you approach communication. Do you find yourself stuck in certain situations? Or maybe you've got some tips of your own that work for you. Let's keep the conversation going. Remember, communication isn't just about what you say. It's about how you make people feel, how you listen, and how you create real connection. So go out there and use what you've learned today to have more purposeful, impactful conversations. Until next time, keep speaking your truth and make every word count.